The first car to bear the four-door sports car designation was the 1989 Nissan Maxima. Fast forward 5 generations to today, Nissan's flagship four-door sports car is now smaller than the Altima, but still has a lot to offer. Our spotlight is on this 2020 Nissan Maxima Platinum, and we're doing it on location from Boston, Massachusetts. Join us as we explore this Maxima and venture around New England. That's right, folks, we're in the United States of America for the first time filming Test Drive, and I do apologize to those who have reached out to me who live in this part of the country. I just didn't have time to film anything other than this, and even this we didn't really have a ton of time to do. This was a vacation, one much needed after 8 years that we have not had one. So we're here in New England. We've driven this about 1,000 miles, and if you're in the US, you're lucky. I know we have a lot of viewers here. We're going to be talking strictly in miles and MPGs during this portion of our drive because I've had to set the computer into miles. But we have done a lot of driving. We started obviously in Quebec, came down through Vermont into New Hampshire, and then into Massachusetts. We're in Woburn, a small suburb just about 9 miles north of Boston, and then we went into Rhode Island, down into Cape Cod, and then up back into this area to go into Maine yesterday and back here to Massachusetts. So we've been pretty much all over New England over the last few days. I'm telling you, we have a really good idea of how this car is to live with on a longer term basis since we've done so much driving with it. Now, the 2020 Maxima uses the same VQ35 DC 3.5 liter V6 engine found on the 2002 Maxima. Now, it is up from that original 255 horsepower, 246 pound-feet of torque. It now makes 300 horsepower and 261 pound-feet of torque. It is 10 horsepower more than the previous engine that they used on the Maxima, so you get a little bit more power out of it. It's still not like a Stinger competitor. Stinger has 365 horsepower. That has a lot of fun going on with it. So maybe Nissan needs to reposition what their four-door sports car really means in their lineup. But that engine was actually used on a number of other products over the course of the last pretty much 2 decades. It is still used on the Maxima as well as the Murano. And like the previous 2 generations of the Maxima, this has a CVT, though Nissan says it is a performance-oriented one and has a manual shift mode. If you get the SR package instead of the Platinum that we have here, then you'd have flappy pedals. Now, not much has changed for 2020. Nissan's Safety Shield 360 and the integrated dynamic control module has been included on all trim levels. That adds active ride control, intelligent engine braking, and intelligent trace control. Those are features that you would probably want to have on a vehicle. Helps keep the car more level when you're going through the corners, and also the engine braking uses the transmission to help slow the vehicle down. So those are new for 2020. Aside from that, in the US, they've just kind of changed the packaging around a little bit. A couple features here and there have been bumped down a level, so you get a little bit more for the price. 2019 was the facelift for the Maxima, but it didn't add all-wheel drive or ProPilot assist like we saw just last week with the Nissan Altima. You have full LED headlights, you have Nissan's floating roof, which looks a little bit better on this. They kind of semi-did it with the Altima, but I think the full-out version of it looks pretty good on the Maxima. This comes in carnelian red paint, $300 option. Aside from that, if you're familiar with the 8th generation Maxima, you're pretty familiar with it, right? I mean, they haven't changed a whole lot of it. I think it looks pretty good. I do spot them on the road. They seem to be a lot more popular here, especially in Massachusetts, than they are somewhere like Quebec. But you do notice them when you see them on the road, and I do like the back end with the smoked taillight design. I think it gives the car a good look. On the inside, we have charcoal ascot leather seating. They are the zero gravity seats on the front. They come with heat and ventilation. And I'm telling you, after spending 1,000 miles in these seats, I've had zero driver fatigue. Now that means my body, not my feet, and that's a separate issue. It depends on your shoes and whatnot. But in the seats themselves, I have not been uncomfortable at all during our travels, and we've spent a ton of time non-stop in them. They work fantastically well. It has a heated steering wheel, heated outboard rear seats, active noise cancellation, active sound enhancements. At least Nissan is upfront about it, that they are using the Bose speaker system on the inside to enhance the engine and exhaust sound from the car. Most manufacturers are doing it, at least they're honest about it. You have an 8-inch infotainment system, which is angled 7 degrees towards the driver, which is a nice feature to have. Comes with Sirius XM, Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, navigation, and a 360-degree camera. And much like some of the other products we've talked about from Nissan, the quality isn't that great. I also find there's a lot of latency. The actual frame rate when you're backing up is really slow. It's choppy, so it could be improved. But it does work. I mean, you can see the lines, and for the most part, any large objects coming behind you. You have dual zone automatic climate control, that 11 speaker Bose audio system. It's not the best. I mean, 11 speakers is okay for a mid-sized car. I just find there isn't a ton of bass, and I do crank the music up to get a little bit more sound out of it, but at least you do have surround system settings for this, unlike we saw on the Altima. You have LED interior lighting, a dual panel moonroof, and a rear power sunshade. Aside from that, you also have mood lighting. It's just a little strip of white LED light that runs around the center and along the door cards. Doesn't look too bad, but that's about it. So even though none of the B-roll that you're seeing was actually filmed here in Boston, again, we didn't have a lot of time to do it. The point of this trip was to spend some time away from doing this stuff, but we are going to be taking this on a road test now through Woburn, talking about this car, how it performs, and everything else about it if you're in the market for the $46,000 four-door sports car. So like I said, since we're here in the US, I've had to switch over the cluster computer to miles. It's not as easy. A lot of cars now, if you have, say, the speedometer on the digital computer, you can usually hold down like the OK button. It'll switch over between miles to kilometers, make it super simple. Not in this case. You have to go into the computer's menu system and actually switch everything over. So as of right now, which is literally 5 minutes after you saw that introduction stuff and the walk around, we are at 968 miles, which is a lot. I mean, that's a lot of driving that we have done on this trip. We've averaged, as of right now, 27.9 miles per gallon. Not too bad at all. We've done a lot of highway driving. Most of it actually has been on the highway, so it's certainly why that number is pretty good. But it's not too bad overall. I mean, this car has been a lot more enjoyable than the Altima was. And if you're watching this after watching the Altima, it's going to be kind of the best idea to see it so you can see how these two cars compare. I mean, it certainly feels a little tighter on the inside, especially the center area here. It's just a little tighter than it was on the Altima, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. I like the way that this car feels. I like the way that it handles. It's just a little tighter, which is what I want out of a sports sedan. And yeah, I guess you can complain now that it doesn't really fit the bill anymore of the four-door sports car, considering the Altima is bigger and you've got all-wheel drive with that. And the VC turbo engine offered on the front-wheel drive model here in the US, it's nowhere near 300 horsepower, but it's peppier. It gives you a little bit more power than the one that we had last week. But 300 horsepower isn't too bad. Very much in line with the Buick Regal that we featured just over a year ago, but nowhere near as close to something like the Kia Stinger. And the Kia Stinger, 365 horsepower, is a lot of fun. I mean, that's a rear-wheel drive car, comes with all-wheel drive in Canada. That is the true four-door sports car. And yeah, it's about $4,000 more than this, but you still get pretty much what you want out of a car with this. I'm happy with it, and that's why I say I've been enjoying this a lot more than the Altima. Put it into sport mode, and it picks up. Doesn't sound half too bad either. It's pretty decent for this vehicle, and people love this engine. This engine has been around, as I said, for 17 years in the Maxima. 18 years, I believe the first car came out on was the 2001 Pathfinder. That's just memory, so I could be wrong on that, but it's been out since 2001. 18, 19 years now. It's an old engine, but it's good for tuners because there's so much history with it that people have been able to unlock pretty much everything, all the potential you can get out of this. And since it is a naturally aspirated V6, you can bolt on some turbos or a supercharger, I guess, if you wanted to. You can get more power out of it. But even at 300, it is really good for daily use, which is essentially all we've been doing over the last 5 days here in the US. It has been daily driving. It has been driving around small towns like Woburn, and I apologize if you live in Woburn and you don't think this is a small town, but yeah, I think the population was about 40,000 according to Wikipedia, which is small in my books. But still, you get to drive around, you have enough power, you can pass everybody on the highway that you need to. No worries about that. If you really want more power, like I said, you can certainly go up and tune it. But if you want the most from Nissan without going to infinity, you're looking at this. But I'm very happy with it. Handles pretty well, is very comfortable. I don't think all-wheel drive would make a huge difference in terms of the enjoyment of this vehicle. It would just add to it for a winter driving ability and maybe off the line. I do find there's a little bit of torque steer if you're coming off the line on full throttle. Not something I'm gonna do here, right? Back in Actonville, back in my nice, snug, cozy little home, I know where all the cops like to hang out, and I know where I can kind of get away with doing some stuff. But here, I don't know where the cops are. And the last thing I need is to call Nissan Canada and tell them, hello, I got your car impounded because I was filming a video, in Massachusetts. So we're not doing that. But I can tell you, when you go off the line, you do have more than enough power. It gets up to speed relatively well. That CVT, performance-oriented one, I don't know, man. It doesn't really get the job done. Definitely better than the Altima, but it's still a CVT. I would prefer an automatic. I would prefer a dual clutch. I would prefer anything other than this, but it's not the worst. And again, if you're buying this for a daily driver, you want something that's a little bit different, yeah, a little bit more than your typical mid-sized car, but you want to have something a little flashier, and people do like these cars, then it's pretty good. The CVT works. I mean, it's fuel efficient. I assume we don't have anything to compare it to because we don't have a regular automatic version of the Maxima to compare it to, but I have to imagine that getting pretty much 30 mpg on this car is pretty good, and it's based quite a bit on that CVT. Great thing about this is this car tells you the speed limit based on its GPS, so there's only a few streets, like side streets, that it doesn't have that information for, but it has been a lifesaver because they just don't post the speed limits as much here. I mean, in Canada, they're everywhere, but I've been looking down at this, and this tells me what the speed limit is. So it says 30. We're going to go up to 30. Not full throttle, because I don't know who's behind me. It's a cop. Yeah, so we're not going to do that. Could you imagine me trying to explain to this cop why I am ripping the crap out of this car with Quebec plates in an area that I'm not supposed to be ripping it in? Not going to get pulled over today, that's for sure, my friends. Yeah, I'm telling you, like, it's not my favorite car, but it really worked fantastically well for this drive. It's so comfortable, especially with these seats. I haven't been uncomfortable one bit, like I said, on the outside driving segment. The interior works. I mean, you've got the driver-focused information system here. Not bad at all. And it helps having Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, because the navigation here is pretty dated. We've talked about that before. It's just not a nice system. It's not the worst system. It gets you through if you really need it, but Nissan could certainly do a better job with that. Having Android Auto, Apple CarPlay, big plus. Navigation, meh, it's there, but I like having it plugged in. Makes a big difference. So here we go. It picks up speed well, especially with the CVT, and I know it's not an enthusiast grade experience here, but because it is a CVT, it can sort of get to where you should be in the RPMs a little bit more efficiently. That's all I'm going to say about it. All right? I don't want to upset anybody. It's still not my favorite. But a lot of people have asked me, you know, it's 2020 model year now. They really haven't changed anything, especially with the Altima now being bigger and all-wheel drive. Do we expect to see an update to the Maxima? Keep in mind that the previous model year, 2019, was the facelift for this, and it only came out this generation in 2015. So it isn't necessarily an old platform. It's not like it's aging in their inventory. Nissan has a lot of other vehicles that they should fully refresh first. So I wouldn't necessarily see an update for 2021 either. I think we're looking at what the Maxima will be probably for another full year, and maybe we'll see an update for 2022. I'm just speculating, but for the most part, this seems to still sell well enough here, especially in America, for those who want something that's a little bit different, not necessarily something that's balls to the wall like the Q50 Red Sport from Infiniti that we featured, but still, if you're looking for something that is a little bit different, this is a good choice, and it has worked really well. I'm really surprised. I guess I shouldn't say I'm surprised. I knew it was going to be better because it had a little bit more power. Okay, a lot more power. It's almost double the horsepower over the Altima. But I knew it was going to work for us, which is one of the reasons why I booked it. But I'm telling you, I'm really happy with the way this has turned out, because it has been enjoyable during the time that we've had it, and especially being able to put it through such a long, not grueling pace of testing here, but still, it's a lot longer than we would normally do. Almost 1,000 miles, and we still have to go home. That's going to be another 300 to 400 miles. So we're looking at about 1,400 miles total driving with this car. That's a lot of time in a week with a vehicle to be able to understand how it works, how it feels, everything about it. And I'm telling you, it's far to be the worst car. I think if Nissan really wants a winner, if they want this to be something actually exciting, maybe still not sell in volume, but be something exciting, have it sort of this attainable, proper flagship sedan in their lineup, it needs to take on the Stinger. How did the 2020 Maxima do for fuel efficiency during our week-long trip? while we managed 7.4 liters per 100 kilometers or 31.8 US miles per gallon on our 100 kilometer test loop, and 8.2 liters per 100 kilometers during our 2,252 kilometer week, or 28.7 mpg after 1,400 miles. Not too bad at all, coming in a little less efficient than the 2020 Altima we featured last week, but we also kept the Maxima in sport mode almost the entire time that we had it. Let's talk likes and dislikes. Nissan's zero-gravity front seats were excellent, as we expected they would be on a long-distance trip like we did. I experienced no driver fatigue from the seats themselves, something that we don't always find when doing these long-distance drives. The 300 horsepower V6 engine was also good, giving us plenty of power to get up to speed on those 70 mph interstates, even when loaded down with passengers and cargo. The exterior design of the Maxima is a plus, as it rides down the middle of design, not being overly aggressive or too tame to turn off the average buyer. Finally, the driver-focused center console was a refreshing design over the typical tablet glued on the top design that we find from a lot of modern car interiors. While the tech itself isn't state-of-the-art, we found that it worked well for our needs and integrated well with the interior design and layout of the 8th generation Maxima. However, we had the same problems with the HVAC system that we experienced on the Altima, topping off our dislike list with inconsistent temperatures and fan speeds while in automatic mode, to the point where most of our trip we kept the fan speed as low as possible, yet still had to frequently adjust the temperature higher to avoid freezing air conditioning. The 11-speaker Bose audio system was better than the one that we found in the Altima, but still left a lot to be desired. Low bass levels and high-end crackling wasn't what we expect from a premium audio system, especially when the MSRP of the vehicle is a tad over $46,000 Canadian. And the intelligent around view monitor suffers from the same low-resolution complaints we've had from other Nissan products, but added in some unnecessary latency and frame rate problems to an already poor system. The Maxima's position in Nissan's North American fleet feels like it's in limbo now, with the Altima offering more interior space and all-wheel drive. The Maxima's only claim to fame in Nissan's consumer portfolio is that V6 engine, ventilated front seats, and the dual-panel moonroof, which are features we often find it from smaller, more affordable vehicles. We said it during our driving segment, and I'll say it again. The Maxima is lost and needs a strong purpose if it's going to exist beyond this generation. Nissan needs to re-engineer this vehicle from the ground up to position it as a stepping stone to the Infiniti brand, with a rear-wheel setup and all-wheel drive to compete with the Kia Stinger. The Maxima doesn't necessarily need to be bigger than the new Altima, but it has to be a magnitude greater than it, and a 300 horsepower front-wheel drive car just doesn't cut it in 2019. Without a radical shift for the Maxima, we might as well start calling it the Nissan Minima.